Coming up on today's episode of PSN, paraclimber Shamus Boulianne shares his journey into the exciting, evolving, just exploding sport of paraclimbing, and we learn a bit more about what it takes to be an athlete and dealing with some injuries from Nathan. This is PSN.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Welcome into Parasport Nation. As always, I am your host, Alex Smyth, and playing through the pain, injured, is Nathan Clement, my co-host. Nathan, what's going on? You're hurt. You're short up for a few days on the IR. Give us a lowdown. What happened?
I'm the walking wounded right now. So for myself, especially being a para-athlete, everyone experiences injuries in sport, but when you have a unique disability like mine with different spasticity, different kind of issues that come around, different trigger points in, say, for example, my arm or in my leg, it can cause a bit of issues from time to time. And really over the last 3 weeks, I've had a really solid kind of training block where I've been building and putting in a lot of effort, a lot of time on the bike. And with that, my condition just kind of gave me a little warning sign of being like, hey, we're overusing my left side right now. And for the last 5-6 days, my left ankle has been a bit of an issue when it comes to walking, when it comes to doing a lot of movement. So I've had to actually take time off the bike to let my ankle rest and recover. Just although the rest of my body feels great, I feel my fitness improving, but my condition needs that time to heal and needs that time to rest. So right now I'm battling with something that I can kind of control, but kind of can't. So it's that tough side when you just want to get out. You just want to do as much as you can, but you know you need to rest because I have another part of me, I have another dimension of my sport, of my life that I need to take care of and I need to rest.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear you are resting. And hopefully this episode is not too strenuous on you. Speaking of which, there was a hub of activity taking place in the parasport world. Take it away with the PSN update.
Now, the PSN update.
The snowboard cross season is in full swing as Canada's Best hit Link, Switzerland for their second of back-to-back race weekends. Tyler Turner placed fourth in the big final. Sandra Hamel placed fourth in the small final, and Alex Massey raced to 11th. In Melbourne, the Australian Open was in full swing as Canadian Rob Shaw and his doubles partner Heath Davidson chased a Grand Slam victory. With early round wins, Shaw and Davidson reached the semifinals. In the semis, Shaw and Davidson fell short to the eventual champions of Sam Shorter and Andy Lapthorne. From Australia to Toronto, the Greater Toronto Hockey League hosted a Canadian Blind Hockey Showcase. In a barn burner, Team Black won 7-6. And that's the PSN update.
Well, there's still much to get to on today's episode, especially with Shamus Boulianne joining us, the paraclimber who is going to share his journey from humble beginnings into the sport to now being a member of the national team as they make their way towards a Paralympic berth in the Paralympic Games in 2028. Here's our interview with Shamus. So I'm curious about your background and how you got into the world of paraclimbing. Take us through that.
Yeah, so I honestly didn't have much of an athletic background growing up. I was pretty opposed to sports in school. Bit of a loner kid, and all the sports in school typically are like our group sports, which didn't really tickle my fancy. But going into university, I kind of felt like there was something missing in my life. I was this scrawny guy who kind of didn't have hobbies outside of school. So, I kind of tried going to the traditional gym because that's what you see everyone do, right? But it wasn't really doing it for me. And I wish I had like an exact memory of how that transition happened. But I just know that one day a friend of mine kind of like told me about the climbing gym. I think I'd started to see climbing kind of pop up on YouTube and stuff as it started to get more popular around 2019. And one day I just decided to go and try it out, just because why not? And I ended up just really liking it. as someone with a disability, specifically like limb difference, it wasn't always easy for me to like work out in the traditional style in the gym. And I just found that when I went to the climbing gym, like I could kind of tailor the experience to my own needs and my own abilities. Just climbing is very progressive and you can kind of start at whatever ability you're at. And I just came away from that first climbing session, like totally beat, like sore in all the right places, sore in the affected part of my body like I'd never felt before. And so that was really a driving force for me to come back the next day. And over time, I started to get more integrated into the community, which really helped to solidify the fact that like I'm a climber now.
So you've done and you've represented Canada multiple times at international competitions, and now you're also doing a lot of work with BC Adaptive Climbers or the Adaptive Climbers of BC. How important is that to you to really help grow and bring more people into the world of adaptive climbing or paraclimbing?
Paraclimbing and adaptive climbing as a whole has completely changed my life. I've met such a incredible community through the sport. I've met my wife through the sport. And it's still such a small sport in Canada. I can count on basically both hands, which in my case is just 7 people that basically, are part of the sport within Canada. And it's slowly growing, but it's really important to me that it grows more and more. We're now going to be included in the Paralympics in 2028. And, I just like to see other people, have the same experience of joy and community that I have through the sport. And, as one of the only people in Canada making it happen, it kind of falls to me to bring more people in. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And what was your reaction when you heard the news that, oh, paraclimbing is going to be in the Paralympics in 2028 in LA?
Extreme unreserved stoke, I would say, was my reaction. It was a long time coming. It was kind of being teased for a couple of years, and announcement deadlines kept getting pushed back. So to finally get the confirmation that it was happening, I mean, it was a very exciting time in the adaptive climbing world. There's still much to know about it. They haven't given us a medal count yet. So we don't know yet which categories are going to be included in the Paralympics. There's naturally going to be some controversy around that. But in general, I think myself and everyone else in this world is just really excited to see our sport continue to grow in that way.
With paraclimbing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, paraclimbing does the lead discipline in the sport. And with competition days, what does it look like? And even how does that competition in the lead or that discipline break down for the athletes?
Yeah, so competitions are typically split into 2 days, with the first being qualifying round, and the second day being the finals round. Like you said, we climb in the lead discipline, which I won't go too technical into climbing terms here, but we're actually on top rope. We're not lead climbing. And that's just a safety thing. Lead climbing involves some pretty big falls that can't be taken by a lot of people with disabilities, particularly if you have like a spinal cord injury or something of that sort. But regardless, so the qualifying round will basically have 2 routes or climbs that you have to do, and you only have 1 attempt at each. And then your combined score from both of those climbs decides your placement and your order going into finals. And then the finals round as well is just 1 climb, and you just have 1 attempt at that climb. And a little more nuance within that is that in the qualifying round, you get to see the climb beforehand, and you can watch other people climb on it. And so you kind of can learn the climb as you're waiting for your turn. In the finals round, you only get 6 minutes to look at it before you go into an isolation zone. And then you just have to kind of sit with your thoughts and your nerves as you're not watching anyone else climb. You're just hearing the roar of the crowd to kind of give you any idea of what's going on. But yeah, it can be quite nerve-wracking in isolation.
Can you tell us a bit more about your classification and if there's any adaptive equipment you're using while you're climbing or other members of your classification would use during their climbs?
Yeah, so my classification is called AU3, which is amputation of the upper limbs of the third degree, which 3 is just the least severe of the AU. So I won't break down all the classifications, but just in terms of AU, there's AU1, which is like an above the elbow amputee, and then AU2 is below the elbow, and then AU3 is someone that has a wrist joint, but that's missing one or more fingers, essentially. So for my classification, myself and the other people in my group, we don't use any specialized equipment. What we can do is tape up our hands. Some people might want to tape their hand if they have particularly soft or sensitive skin, which might be the case if you're a true amputee. I'm not actually an amputee. I have a congenital limb difference. But that would be the extent of it, is just some tape. I don't like using it because it reduces friction and feel. So if you can get away with it, it's always nice to use your own skin. Typically, the only adaptive equipment that's used in competitions is most common among like the leg amputees who might use a prosthetic. If you count a blindfold as equipment, maybe the visually impaired will use that. And then there's kind of miscellaneous, like, braces and whatnot that someone might need for their particular impairment.
In paraclimbing, you mentioned it earlier with the roaring crowd noises. You have a very special circuit throughout the year with races like with competitions like Salt Lake City, as well as Innsbruck, and you get to go to some really cool spots. Is there any competition that stands out most to you that you look forward to every single year on the calendar?
Innsbruck really is the most exciting one that recurs every year, I would say. First of all, getting to go to Europe is just like incredible. But the venue in Innsbruck is absolutely world class. There's probably no better climbing gym in the entire world. It's where all of the top level climbers go to train during the off season. It's this beautiful outdoor wall. They have some of the best setting in the world, some of the best hold selection. And the crowd that shows up for that competition is just so electric. I wish I could go there every year. It's an expensive thing to do. But when I can afford it, I very much look forward to it. But this year, actually, not as part of the regular circuit, but every 2 years we have our World Championships. And this year they're being hosted in Seoul, in South Korea. And that I'm really looking forward to, because I've been to Europe now and competed there, and I would love to go back, but to go to South Korea is something special, I think. So
For yourself, like, what do you do specifically as you prepare for something like a world championship, for these major competitions? Are you changing up your approach to training or training on and working on specific aspects of climbing to really make sure that you are at the best level that you can be going into a major competition like that?
yeah, so in like the final month, kind of, especially leading up to a big competition, a big focus on the training turns more towards on-sighting, which is the ability to climb something on the first try without having seen it before, which really is the style of competition, as I described earlier. So you kind of start to tune all of like the strength and power training that you've been doing through the rest of the year and really fine tune that into like just building up your ability to do something on the first try, trying as hard as possible. That's a huge part of it. And especially in a world championship year, I think it's important just to go to as many competitions leading up to that as you can, so that you can just build up that kind of resilience to the nerves and just be used to the competition environment. Because my first world championships, I was just my nerves were shot. Like I did not give it I gave it my all, but my all was not my best that day because I had just been like so nervous leading up. So it's important to be used to that frame of mind.
Being a climber from British Columbia, like obviously there's so many amazing locations like the Okanagan, the Kootenays, but also Squamish. Is there somewhere that every year when it's the summer months or when it's warmer outside that you look forward to going, or really anything you want to tackle in this province or across Canada?
Yeah, Squamish is really the one that I make a point of going to a few times during the peak season. Which it's funny you say summer, it's actually more the fall, which is the prime climbing season, because you don't want it warm so much as like a nice, like maybe 5 to 8 degrees with a cool breeze. But yeah, Squamish is just so hard to beat. And we have a lot of great climbing here in the Okanagan, which is amazing. Throughout the rest of the year that I get to climb. So Squamish kind of becomes like the special little getaway where I can just experience a different rock type and such a world-class location.
I'm curious, Shamus, this kind of relates to your last two responses. Like, let's say you go to a new wall or a new location and you're preparing to climb. What is the first thing you're looking at? What is the first thing you're trying to visualize as you approach a wall face, whether it is in competition or recreation and training? Like, are you looking for handholds? Are you looking for kind of footholds? Are you looking for a clear pathway to the top? Like, take us through that kind of mentality, that approach you're taking when you first come to face with a climbing surface.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit all of the above. There's very much a process of visualization and trying to like see yourself on the wall and visualize each movement and how you're going to get through it. If you can, like a lot of people will bring binoculars to World Cups so that they can really get a good look at every hold on the wall. Because if you can know what's coming without having climbed it, that can just be a huge advantage, because you'll climb faster, you'll climb, as if you've been there already. So yeah, you're just trying to visualize each movement, particularly if you can spot any rests, that can be really important. Because if you're up there and you're pumping out and you're going through a hard section, but you know that you saw a rest a couple moves away, that can be the little boost you need to like try hard and get to the rest and shake out. And also visualizing what you think will be the hard sections. Because you might be cruising through some easy parts and then suddenly it's hard and you weren't expecting it, and now you're falling. But if you were anticipating it, you can kind of you can just know that it's coming and and get through that. So yeah. It depends a little bit what you're trying to get out of it. If you're in competition, then for sure you're trying to visualize every little piece. If I'm just out on a casual climbing day, I'm probably not putting as much energy into that, because I don't necessarily mind falling and having to try again. But
is there anything you take the most pride in for being a paraclimber, being in this world of paraclimbing?
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's it feels really good to overcome personal barriers. So there's a lot of pride to be had in, being able to climb the same thing as the guy next to you who isn't impaired. There's a little bit of personal satisfaction, even in the case where I can climb something that the guy next to me can't. I mean, that, like, in a way can feel very good. And I think there's a lot of pride too, just in being one of the first in Canada to, I'm not the first by any means, but, one of the first, say, 10 people to really be at the forefront of paraclimbing within Canada. And there's a lot of pride in that. And I think a lot of pride to come in the future as I watch the sport grow more and more. I've always kind of said that one of my goals in the sport is to eventually be like beaten by the younger, fitter Shamus, who's like coming up in the sport and kind of pushes me, the old man, out. Like, that would be very satisfying if the sport got to that point where I'm old and can't compete against these young kids coming up. So yeah, there's a lot to be proud of. I think doing any sport and in para sports, I think there's just that extra layer of kind of feeling like you're making something happen.
And Seamus, one last question before we let you go. I know as part of, that hope of, being beaten by the next generation, the next wave of athlete, one thing that you've done yourself is lead courses and have opportunities to showcase paraclimbing to others, including having Nathan in one of your classes early on. Like, why was that important for you to showcase and highlight the sport of paraclimbing for others while also trying to compete at a high level yourself?
I want more people in the sport. It's lonely here. And I just want more people to know the joys that I've known, and to experience like the physical progression that I've felt through the sport. I believe climbing is one of the best sports for people with disabilities, to prove themselves physically, because you can really begin at any ability level, and the ability to progress at any pace is right there, with the right guidance and tools. And so for me, it's just, I would just really like more friends in the sport, more people in BC getting after it. And yeah, I can't be the only one forever. So it'd be nice to have more of us.
Well, the sport is absolutely growing right now, and I'm sure you're going to be joined by some more friends soon. Seamus, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We'll definitely catch up down the road.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And that was our interview with Shamus Boulianne, paraclimber. Nathan, I really found it so interesting that, the ties that we have to members of the parasport world, you being one of those early members of Shamus's classes out in BC, offering up a clinic on paraclimbing. What was that experience like for you?
It was absolutely incredible. I met Shamus about a month before that at an Athletes Can forum, an event, and it was really cool because previously I got to write and cover parasport through the Parasport Update that AMI hosted, as well as with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. So for me to finally meet a name I've talked about so many times or written about so many times was really, really cool. And just seeing his creativity when it came to teaching, showing the lines, and really bringing in a lot of people. There was a couple people there who were previously climbers, but then they suffered an injury and they were trying to figure out a way that they could get back into a sport they loved or back into a sport they were passionate about. And Shamus was very generous with his time, taking questions, but also doing the lines similar to how that person would do it. So for me, with only one arm, I'm climbing up on the wall with one arm and one leg, and Shamus beforehand would see me do these lines, and then he would coach me. He would guide me to figure out a way that I can save my body's energy while I'm climbing up there, because we've both done some paraclimbing in the past. It is a demanding sport on the limbs, and especially how he was talking about when he first got into it. Your right side, your sides, your bodies are sore. They're aching, but it's that good kind of aching because they're being exerted to their max. And I remember I was sore for a week afterwards just because it was so demanding and so challenging. But it's really amazing to have leaders like him in the community, where it's still a very small grassroots event, and very grassroots community in Canada, but with events coming up like the national championships in February in La Prairie, it is going to be just incredible. And I think it's going to be a surprise of how many people actually show up to that event and just see how it's growing, and just the amount of thought and just anticipation you need to have for each wall or each rock that you're climbing, whether it's indoors and outdoors, is just impressive to see and listen to him speak about.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was very telling as he kind of explains, you're just trying to visualize, okay, what's my route going to be? What are going to be the challenging parts of the climb? What are going to be the spots where I can take a rest? I kind of equated a bit to a professional driver or racer, where you're looking at, it's like, okay, I need to visualize the course, the track that I'm going to be driving on. Okay, I know there's going to be a hairpin turn up here. I need to slow down in this stretch. Oh, I can really put the pedal to the metal here. That's what the sense I get when I heard Shamus talking about how he's visualizing the wall. I also thought it was really great hearing him talk about the competitions on the international stage and how special a place like Innisbrook is. I know you and I have seen online some of these international climbing competitions. They are huge. The fandom, the support there is immense. It seems like climbing, especially competition climbing, it is a strong community that really supports each other, but it's just a little bit hidden. People don't necessarily know about it, but I think that's going to change as we make our way to LA in 28, because more people are going to learn about the sport of climbing and paraclimbing, and it's going to be huge. Final thoughts on the competition of paraclimbing and just the atmosphere around that, Nathan?
It's special. It is that kind of hidden secret right now that, as you mentioned, and I fully believe, is just going to explode and really burst out there, where, like, out of a lot of the para sports, this is by far one of the most impressive ones out there. Just the sheer determination, the sheer grit, but also athleticism that you need to have across all the categories. And what's so special about it, is with those events like Innsbruck, like Salt Lake City, and even what's probably going to be happening in Seoul and South Korea, is you have great integration already between the able-bodied counterparts and the para classifications and the para races. And it's really amazing to see, like, even in Canada, Canadian climber and Canadian Olympian Alana Yip does a lot of work in helping other visually impaired climbers for the Canadian team as a guide. And there's so many people who want to give back and want to support, and it's really a sport that is going to have that fanfare, is going to have that crowd attention, and just more and more times people can talk about it, people can see, people can look up, or even look up what Shamus is doing on his Instagram. It is really impressive. And as we've mentioned, it's that sleeping kind of dragon that is just going to burst out and really become just an absolute spectacle that you have to watch. You have to see what they're up to all the time.
Absolutely. It's a sport that really appreciates its fans and community, just like we do here on Parasport Nation, but it's all the time we have for today's episode. Catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.